When I started Maverick Mind, now somewhere around 2 years ago, which is wild, I really wanted it to be a space for conversations exactly like this one, where we don't necessarily have to agree on everything or even fully understand it, but we stay open, we stay curious, we explore nuance, we explore ideas that might sit a little bit outside of our usual way of thinking. And this is exactly one of those conversations. Today, I'm joined by Chris Nielsen. Her path has taken her from the world of classical ballet into something a lot more unconventional, working as a therapist and exploring past life regression. Now, in this episode, it's not necessarily about convincing you to believe in past lives, not at all, or even what happens in a regression session necessarily. It's really about sharing Chris's story, her experiences, and what she's uncovered through that process and now channeled into her book. And part of that includes exploring what she believes to be some of her own past lives, including one as the composer Tchaikovsky. You can take from this conversation whatever resonates, whether that's a deeper curiosity, whether it's a new perspective, or simply just hearing a different way of understanding the human experience, because underneath it all, that's really what this conversation is about. It's about the feeling of being in the right world, but not necessarily in the right role. It's about navigating identity shifts. It's about following a path that doesn't always make logical sense at the time, which I think if you're listening to this, we are all doing. As I said, Chris's journey started in the very strict world of classical ballet before leading her through theatre, cultural communication, and eventually into this world of therapy and healing. From there, we go into much deeper territory, exploring ideas around intuition, emotional patterns, and the possibility that some of what we carry might go back much, much further than we think. So wherever you land with this, I just invite you to listen, stay open, and see what resonates. So Chris Nielsen, a huge welcome to Maverick Mind. Chris, a huge welcome to Maverick Mind. What a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor, and I really think that Maverick Mind and my projects during the last years couldn't be something more suitable, because really everything that I have done during the last years, I think it's quite unconventional. So I think that your podcast and your title suits me a lot. So thank you a lot. It's such an honor.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, life has taken you on a really, really interesting path, and I'm excited for to kind of introduce people to your story. But I'd love to kind of begin. I think where I gathered a lot of your story does begin, and that is in the world of classical ballet.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your journey towards pursuing that as a career. I think it's something that a lot of kids, we say like, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a ballerina. Very few actually do that. So I'd love to kind of dive into your journey through dance.
So it was not my decision or my choice, because I was very little, I was very young, I was 6 years old. When my grandmother decided that she would take me to an audition, let's say, to the Bucharest National Opera, which is the main opera house in my native country, Romania, in Central Europe. And that was something extraordinary for myself, because up to that moment, I didn't know anything about classical ballet, performing arts, classical music, and so on. I was a very normal, let's say, child. I played a lot with my friends. I attended the kindergarten and so on, so nothing special. And this moment really changed completely my life, because I felt immediately such, how should I say, a real love affair. I felt in love all of a sudden with ballet, with dance, and with all the universe connected with it, meaning the rehearsals, the nice costumes, music, especially music, and of course, the performances, the stage, the miracle, let's say, that happens when you transform yourself in order to go in front of an audience, the makeup, everything. So it was like becoming all of a sudden part of a fairy tale. And I was, of course, fascinated by the idea of interpreting different roles, different characters from the most important famous ballet. And it was something very interesting also from an inner point of view, because ballet learns discipline, and for a child it's very important to learn how to organize your time, your energy, everything, to be grounded, to be connected, to be attentive to your own body, to your own movements, to connect your feelings and your movements, the way you express yourself in front of an audience. And so everything was very interesting and very new, of course, for myself. And I grew up, I would say, in this universe because I attended the classical ballet courses between 6 and 16 years, so for 10 years. And it was a lot of work, but also, of course, it was very rewarding because we had two performances, one around Christmas and one at the beginning of the summer, at the end of one year of studies. And it was a great experience for a child, and especially for a girl, I think, because I think that girls are more frequently attracted by ballet and by dancing. And it was something that opened my mind, that opened my inner world, that really created an inner universe in which I felt completely like home. But what didn't work in this story were two important aspects. So the first of them, unfortunately, I didn't have the chance of meeting a great teacher, a mentor, a model, let's say. On the contrary, unfortunately, the person who was teaching us, a former ballerina in our country, was an impossible character, and she was very mean, very harsh. She didn't have any important human values in her heart. She was someone who really didn't manage to find the best in you, to develop yourself and to really support you in your works. She was completely uninterested in it. Unfortunately, she was interested only in making a great financial affair from teaching us. And it was something very hard for a child to bear. And only the immense passion that I had for ballet and for music kept me in going on with studying ballet. But I want to emphasize that nowadays, when I am a mother, I can tell you, both from a child and from a mother point of view, that it's really extremely important to have great teachers, which are both good technicians and great human beings, because frequently it happens to find a good teacher in his or her own artistic or other kind of professional field, but to not have, unfortunately, the same level of pure human quality. And it's very important for a child to have the important values in front of yourself when you are developing as a human being too. And because of this teacher, I didn't want to follow this path. And the second reason, important reason, was that as I was growing up and as I was becoming a teenager, and of course that I was starting to learn more about life, about myself, and so on, I understood slowly that, unfortunately, ballet, although I loved it so much and in such an intense way, was not very suitable for my personality. Of course, that at that moment I was not so conscious about it as I am now as an adult, but I felt it intuitively. Now I can always put it in words very nicely, but then I couldn't speak about it probably as I'm speaking right now. But I completely felt that it was unsuitable for my personality in this current life. Why? Because I am a very Maverick Mind person. I am a very unconventional and I'm quite original and I have a very strong personality. And ballet doesn't help you always very much, especially if you study classical ballet, because in classical ballet you imitate a lot. So you just have to continue on the same path which was initiated hundreds of years ago by great ballet masters, choreographers, dancers. And even when you are learning a choreography, you usually imitate what the other previous ballet dancers did before yourself. And I was very much once again in love with ballet, and I'm still very keen on ballet, of course, but I didn't feel inside myself that I was really ready to imitate all my professional life someone in what he or she is doing. And I think that I was right from this point of view. But what happened is that unfortunately at 16 years old I entered the depression state when I had to leave the ballet world, because I knew that it wasn't the suitable world and path for myself in this lifetime, but it was very hard to find another path. So I entered a very difficult period of my life when I had to search another professional road. And to put it shortly, because it's a very long story, I tried after 16 years to turn towards theater, and I specialized myself for 3 years in theater directing. But then unfortunately, it was another path which didn't work. It was also mainly because meeting another character, let's say, in my life, my theater teacher, who was another problem. And I had to, in the end, to choose, let's say, to mix my native talent for communication, which was noticed by a few teachers, by my parents, and so on, and my passion and my background in performing arts. And this is how I chose at about 18, 19 years old to become a specialist in cultural communication, or let's say in PR or marketing for cultural organizations. And I chose to study in France because they have such a long tradition in promoting arts, in arts management, in cultural institutions that are trying to settle all the artistic field. And it was a choice which also led me to one of my greatest professional experiences until now, to work for the Cannes Film Festival, which allowed me to put in practice everything that I learned about cultural communication in an international context, let's say. And I think that I managed to intertwine, let's say, my background in performing arts and my communication studies, because at 25 years old I managed to publish in Paris my first book, which was about promoting an opera or ballet performance. So I studied all the important strategies put in practice by all the important lyrical theaters in the world, and I tried to also bring, of course, my personal view on it, and to suggest which are the most efficient strategies that we may use nowadays in order to attract new audiences, and especially young people, towards opera and ballet. So this was in a few words the beginning of my story, but of
Yeah.
course, that what you don't have in this story is how I arrived to become a holistic therapist and how I
Yeah.
started
Before we go
everything.
into that bit, I kind of want to go backwards a little bit again
Mhm,
to
mhm.
that point where, you've been doing classical ballet for 10 years or so. And then the moment when you kind of were starting to feel in your body or in yourself that it wasn't actually for you, that must have been really hard. I mean, obviously it was, because you said that you went into a depression after that, which I can completely see and completely understand. But I can imagine when you've grown up in that place and it's kind of been all that you know in terms of uh dance, or like the thing that you like, or a hobby that you have, or the maybe the pursuit of discipline, or doing all of that training. And then to kind of, and also I can imagine a lot of friends or a lot of people that you knew were also involved in that uh, circle, or within that same dance classes or same productions or whatever. So I can imagine being that age when you're kind of just trying to figure out who you are anyway, to then take that, to go left when everyone is going right, must have been like really a tension within you. Can you remember at that time what was really going on in your mind at that time? Do you have like a clearer way, or did you just kind of go into a dark space and you don't really know necessarily what happened until you
Yes, I know very well because as a therapist, 15 years later, I worked a lot on this, and this is one of the main reasons which brought me to my book, Being Piotr Ilyich. So I know very well what happened. Yes, I felt all the time something that repeated in my life, a pattern that repeated even later, and sometimes it still repeats nowadays. I felt that I was in the right universe, in the right professional field, let's say. I felt that everything was very familiar and dear to me, but I felt that I was completely in the wrong position. So I felt that, yes, I loved a lot and I still love a lot the stage and everything connected with the idea of with performing arts, with a live performance in front of an audience. And I was very much in love with music, with artists, with the particular emotions that you have before entering on stage. But I felt that I was in not in the right position and I couldn't explain it. And this gave birth in my soul to a very, very strong inner conflict. Because to some extent, some of my soul wanted to remain in the same professional field, and the other part of my soul wanted to quit because felt that something was not in place. And that's why I tried to pursue further, even further, a career linked with performing arts. And even nowadays, I'm promoting classical musicians all the time. So I'm still doing it a part of my time. I and I think that the greatest revelation and the strongest feeling was the one I had when I was about 26 years old, I think, and I was in the United States. I was part of the first program organized in the USA for preparing future opera managers. And it was a course organized by Opera America, the organization that reunites the theater, the lyrical theaters in the USA. And I was in Philadelphia. I was attending a conference, and then I went to New York to attend the courses themselves. And while being in Philadelphia, I felt that I was completely put apart between two very strong feelings. I was very happy of being there and feeling that I was at the right place. And a part of me was just telling me that you are not in the right position and that you are simply consuming your energy and your time useless. I felt that doing PR and doing communication was to some extent like being near the stage but not really on the stage, and not doing something as creative as I dreamt of. And I felt that I was serving art, but I was not really doing art myself. And years later, when this inner conflict became even stronger and extremely difficult for myself, I started to work on it, and this was one of the main reasons which brought me to the revelation, which I described in my book, Being Piotr Ilyich,
Yeah.
and which completely explains from a logical point of view why I felt exactly this idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people will relate to that feeling that you just described there, especially when you go from studying or even just being in love with some kind of creative channel, whether that's making clothes, whether that's dancing, whether that's painting, whatever. And then you go into the industry of it. It can really feel like you are beside the creativity rather than being in it, until you sometimes reach a certain point. Like, for example, when I worked in fashion, I was spending a lot of time actually doing like spreadsheets,
Mhm.
talking to factories and stuff like that, which is like not my zone of genius at all. My zone of genius is the coming up with the ideas bit and the creating the vision thing. And I think a lot of us will relate to that when you get into taking it quote unquote seriously, but then you can feel like you almost like you're on the outside looking in rather than really being in it. And I can imagine also when you've danced a lot, well, I used to dance, but then watching dance is not the same as doing it sometimes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes, but what I think it's important, it's the fact that um, anytime when you have a feeling, it's very important not to ignore it. And my own experience, both as a client and as a therapist, showed me during the last 10 years that really each intuition that you had, each problem, inner blockage, emotional stuff that it's in your heart, has a very, very clear and logical explanation. The problem is that most frequently the cause is placed in your subconscious mind. If you, let's say, what I call the zero moment or the original cause of your problem, of your intuition, etc., is based in your current life, then you might have the chance, if you are an analytical person, to solve it by yourself, to just stay with yourself, to do, I don't know, meditation, or to have intuitions that help you might help you create the link, the bond between the cause and your emotional blockage or your intuition or your problem. But if your problem is not placed in your current life, and this was my case, then of course you have to dig a bit deeper, let's say, in your subconscious mind. But what's really fascinating is that you will anytime, but really anytime, find your answers. I didn't meet any situation in my own life or in my client's life in which someone came with a problem and the problem came out of nowhere. That's impossible. So each time when you have a phobia, a relationship that you don't understand, a pattern of behavior, etc., this is what frequently brings people to a therapist, and you always find a cause. It's just that you might remember it or not in your conscious mind, but it's there in your subconscious mind. It's always a zero moment. It's no time. It's something in our lives that happens by accident, that it's random. This can't happen. So in my life and in each person's life, I'm sure that everything has a clear explanation.
Before we continue, I want to pause and share something that I built for heart-led creatives like you. Ember is the supportive space to ground, to regulate, to reset, and to grow. Inside, you'll learn how to work with your creative energy instead of against it, so you can move through blocks and deeply trust your voice. You can try Amber for free for 7 days. Just head to the link in the show notes to join us, and I cannot wait to see you inside. Now, let's get back to the episode. Yeah, definitely. And if you go into what you just mentioned or touched upon there in terms of your work with therapy now, can you talk a little bit about your journey into gathering that understanding of what happens in your
Yes.
current life, maybe
Yes,
outside of
of
that?
course. So, when I was about 25 years old, I was already an adult, and I had a lot of problems, both emotional and physical problems. Fortunately, none of them was what you would call a very serious or difficult or important problem, but there were a lot of them, so small issues that bothered myself on a daily basis. I was always, almost always having a respiratory infection. I had problems with my digestion and especially with the gallbladder, etc. So from a physical point of view, but also from emotional point of view, I had problems because I frequently had some depression states, or I felt that I couldn't find my professional path, I couldn't find a life partner, and so on. So I had a lot of questions, and what was very interesting in my life is that fortunately I had what you would probably call quite a common or peaceful life during my childhood or my teens. So I couldn't, I'm a very analytical and grounded person, and I was always analyzing myself, and I couldn't find the important causes because I had no important traumas, or of course that no life is perfect, and I had my own small problems in my current life, but there was no something important which could explain my frequent physical or emotional problems and blockages. And I kept on searching and searching, and at a particular moment, a very good friend suggested me to see a therapist who was specialized in Reiki and bioenergetical therapies, so everything connected with Chinese medicine and so on. And I went to see him, and I must underline the idea that up to 25 years old, I had almost no contact with alternative medicine, with complementary medicine. And I think that is very important to mention it for our audience, because everything that I'm practicing right now, or that I'm stating in my book or in my podcast, my book being Piotr Ilich, or my podcast Time Traveling, is based on practical experience. I didn't have any previous beliefs. I didn't read important books or people around me or in my family who told me before, listen, life is like this or like that, or you must believe in this or that. So I was quite an empty page. And I think it's very important because I was very flexible, very open-minded, but I didn't have previous beliefs about past lives or about anything. I am Christian because I'm born in Central Europe, and we are Christians, but I didn't have any strong approach connected with church or with God. I believed in God, but in a general way, I didn't ask very much questions about it. So I think it was very important because it came from practical experience, and it gave myself a lot of confidence in what I discovered and what I lived, because it was not based on beliefs, it was based on what I really saw and lived on myself, and what I then saw on other colleagues that trained with myself on, and later on my clients. So I started to work with this therapist. I started to see improvements, and he proposed me to join his school because he was also preparing students who studied under his guidance. And first of all, I went out of curiosity, and then I started to be really extremely attracted by all of this Reiki and bioenergetical therapies and Chinese medicine field, because I started to see immediate effects on myself, on my colleagues, etc. And I was really fascinated to discover this unseen world of energies, the relationship between body, mind, spirit, between our emotions and the organs and the systems affected by particular emotions, between our meridians studied also in acupuncture, and our emotions and so on. And I was really fascinated because it was a whole world opening in front of myself that I didn't know about before. And I studied about 2 or 3 years. And then I also felt the need to learn more about our physical body, because when you practice energetic therapies, you must also know a lot of things about our human anatomy. And I studied also 1 year about physical anatomy and therapeutical massage and so on, in order to get in touch with the physical body more. And then I still felt that I needed to learn a lot about the soul and about the mind, about the relationship, about between what we feel and what we live, and how this is transformed into energy and into physical illness. And at this particular point, my teacher also suggested me that my problems are not rooted in this current life. And this is why I couldn't find all my answers. But he told me, listen, it's not correct, and I really appreciated a lot his approach. It's not honoring me as a professionist to tell you what happened, although he had clairvoyance and he saw quite a lot of my past life problems. And he told me, you must discover your problems by yourself. And now, 10 years later, I appreciate so much his approach, because now I know that even if you have clairvoyance, and there are a lot of very gifted people who have it, it's very unstable, and I wouldn't suggest anyone to tell anyone what he or she sees about a past life, because you must be pushed in a subjective interpretation. And of course that facts are facts, but it's very important to see yourself from within and from your higher self point of view, how you interpret the things you are living. Because you can't, even if you speak about your current life, no one, not even your parents, your lover, your husband, your child, can't know exactly what you are feeling. They might be quite, let's say, close to the truth, but not exactly as you are seeing the truth. And my teacher pushed me to search even further. And that's when things really moved very fast in my life, and in a quite miraculous way, I would say, nowadays. First of all, I met the only specialist which was based in my country and which had previously studied at the Michael Newton Institute in the United States. Michael Newton being the most important pioneer who studied life between lives, what we call afterlife, so the period between incarnations, and he wrote very interesting books. He died at about 90, 10 years ago, so his works are already studied by specialists by so many years. And then after doing a session with this therapist, I accessed for the first time a past life. And I started for the first time to notice in my own body the changes, and especially to see in my soul and in my mind the bonds so important and so clear between what I was living here and now in my current life and what had previously happened. And this was the start which gave me trust in the process and which made me even more curious. And then I decided to become a student of the Past Life Regression Academy based in the United Kingdom, and founded by another great figure in past life regressions, Andy Tomlinson, who is also author of important books. And I studied for about 3 years. Under the guidance of a great teacher, Wissam Awad. And during these 3 years, of course, that I practiced a lot, both as a client and as a therapist. Why I practice? Because first of all, when you learn a new therapy, you must understand it deeply from within. So you must firstly practice on your own person in order to be a good therapist and to really understand all its effects and the way it functions. And then, because before you work with clients, you must heal yourself as much as possible and clean your fields, let's say, your subtle bodies as much as possible. And so I worked a lot with myself during a lot of years. And I should say that during the last 10 years, I visited more than 30 past lives of myself. And at a particular moment, I understood that much more than only healing my body and my soul, what happened is that I started to appreciate and to, it's hard to find the suitable words, to be fascinated and extremely grateful for having this opportunity, because I thought that much more than only healing, it's a great research tool about the human spirit, the human soul, the human life. Because what I want to emphasize for people who are listening to us is that a past life session means only part of it simply exploring or navigating through the story itself. So of course that you want to understand what happened in a particular past life, and you go through the most important events, you meet the most important characters and so on. But then the second, and I think the most important part of a regression session, is the moment of transformation, of healing itself, where the therapist, using specific techniques, helps you to understand not only what happened, but why it happened, why you had to pass through this or that experience, what lesson you had to learn, what was your life mission, who are the important characters which were in that past life, and that are also most of the time present in your current life, even if the roles are changed. So it happens frequently that your child in the past life is your husband in the current life, and your mother has become your sister, and so on. But even if the roles change, the feelings remain, and you are always continuing, resuming in a new life all the relationship and the stories exactly from the point where you left it. Wow. So what I discovered is, during these years of working both as a therapist and as a client, that you have this great chance to see, let's say, behind the curtains, behind the life story of your current life, and to understand everything behind it, to understand your reactions, your lessons, where they come from, why you live this or that, to understand every relationship that you have, every blockage that you have, and to understand that nothing is accidental, that everything has a purpose, that everything has a reason, and to understand how our lives are conceived. And now I'm perceiving my past lives not only as, let's say, completely different stories, but rather as different chapters of the same unique book, which is the book of my soul, of my spirit. And I now perceive my evolution, and I understand my choices, why I chose to be this or that in that lifetime, and what brought me in this lifetime, and so on. So I am very conscious right now about the bonds between everything, and I didn't have this chance before. And I think that it brought me a lot of understanding about my own path, of course, as a spirit, but also about our paths as a mankind. I understood a lot of things about Why do we come here on earth? And a lot of important concepts which are now very much discussed, debated in the spiritual world, like, I don't know, destiny versus free will, or karma, or of course reincarnation, and so on, are topics that I have understood from my practical experience. And I think this is such a rich thing. And this is also what pushed me to write my book, Being Pyotr Ilyich, Tchaikovsky's Inner Life Revealed by Himself 130 years later, because working on my past lives, at a particular moment, I discovered only a few, I don't know, 4 or 5 famous, let's say, past lives. I must underline that the fact of being famous from a human point of view is not at all important or relevant when you are under trance, because when you are under trance, you live as any human being, and without the glamour that we add to a famous artist after he is dead. So he's dead. So I didn't. I felt with all my heart that any of my lives was equally important for the evolution of my soul, no matter if I was famous or not. But when I discovered my past life as Tchaikovsky, I was, of course, surprised and fascinated too. I didn't expect it at all. And after the first 2 or 3 sessions on working on the traumas connected with my past life as Tchaikovsky, this idea of writing this book emerged with such a strong power. It felt like an inner urge to write it. And I had 2 reasons. One is very personal, and the second one, the more important one, regards all of us. The personal reason was that I felt that my current life was very much influenced by Tchaikovsky in a greater proportion than other past life characters, no matter if they were famous or not. And I'm explaining in my podcast, Time Traveling, why. Because I discovered in my research during all these years on my patients and on myself that not all your past lives are active in your current life, and not all of the active ones are equally important. So they do not influence yourself in equal proportions. It depends on what your soul chose to solve before coming in this current life on earth. So maybe you want to solve 5 problems from life number 1, 2 problems from life number B, another 2 problems from life number C, and so on. And so the problems that you want to solve in this current life determine the importance of your influence of past characters towards your current life. So I understood that Tchaikovsky influences a lot my current life, and moreover, of course, that I knew him as a great composer, and I knew everything that all the people working in artistic field know about him. But I didn't research a lot about his personal or his intimate life. Never. And when I discovered this past identity, I was shocked myself to find such a sensitive soul. He was extremely, but extremely sensitive, and he was so profound. And I don't know how to put it in order not to seem that I'm boasting myself, but he was such a great human with capital H character. And I thought that if God one day would ask me, listen, my child, what life would you like to continue? I would definitely choose him. And I repeat it once again, not because he's famous, because he is not the famous person I impersonated on earth, but because of his human inner beauty. And then the second reason why I chose to write this book, and this is the most important reason, is that his life was a very intense one, full of problems and full of traumas. It was a nightmare for myself to heal after this past life. So it was not pleasant at all. But this rich and intense life implicitly addresses most of the problems that any human being lives nowadays. I would give a few examples. Inner child, the fear of abandonment, the relationship with your higher self and with your subconscious mind, the relationship with the divine, love, and especially impossible love stories, the relationship with the family karma, and also the psychogenealogy. So what we inherit from an emotional point of view from our families. Destiny and free will, karma, of course, reincarnation, the way a blocked emotion transforms during years and years into physical illness, what happened to him also, depression, suicide, creation and creativity, intuition. So all the problems that I faced myself as a patient while working myself on this past life as Tchaikovsky are problems which are, I think, in our lives, generally speaking. And I received during my healing process so many extraordinary answers from the world above. From the divine, from my spiritual guides, and so on. And from a certain point of view, I felt that there were such great truths and revelations that I had in my hand that it was such a pity to keep them only for myself. And I felt an inner urge to share these truths and these spiritual gifts in the end that were given to me from the world above. So I thought that it would be a great opportunity not only for the people who are classical music lovers or who appreciate Tchaikovsky and who, of course, will find a very intimate and personal portrait of himself told from within for the first time, but also an opportunity for people who might not even be music lovers, but who are interested in finding spiritual answers. And I think that my answers might help any of us, because in the end I've noticed as a therapist that our lives are not so different than we may think, and that the most important dramas are quite the same for all of us. Losing someone dear, not being able to fully live your love story, not finding your way or your life mission. Life mission is another topic that I'm addressing in the book, and the inner call to follow a professional path. So any of these topics I thought that might help any of us, because in my life it also happened so frequently to find the ideal book at the perfect moment, which answered my questions and my quests at that particular moment in my life. So I thought, listen, maybe one day one person will pick up Being Piotr Ilyich and will just think that this book gave him or her the answers he or she was seeking, and this would be my greatest fulfillment.
Yeah, that's so interesting that I think I think it's really important that you said that it doesn't really matter whether you were famous in a past life. And also it really doesn't matter because it's just a soul, right? You're just a soul in a body,
Yes,
in a flesh
yes,
puppet.
yes, of course.
Like
Yes,
living a
you are,
life.
yes,
And it's like the kind of chain of events that brings that soul from person to person, whatever life
yes,
it kind of plays out in that lifetime. But I think that we all, no matter your lifetime, no matter like books you read from years ago, everyone's still facing the same kind of roadblocks or issues or internal conflicts or tensions in our life. And I think that that's also interesting, just to kind of see how the cycle just kind of repeats and repeats until obviously you learn and you grow if you do the work to actually heal something. which I'm sure many of the people listening are that kind of person that would definitely. I kind of want to touch on something that I think, again, a lot of people listening will resonate with, whether they are pursuing a similar path to you or whether they're not, but everyone will resonate with choosing a path, the road that's less traveled, like doing something that most people might not get. So I'd love to know some insights from your current life or past life about, choosing the road less traveled and choosing to create a life where you're going to pursue writing a book like this or doing therapy that you do, in a society or a world where maybe not everyone's going to choose that path.
Okay, so yes, one of the most important things, as I have already mentioned, that I discovered during the last years, is that we keep on continuing our paths. It doesn't mean that we always choose the same professional path or that we live in the same country, although this might also happen. But I mean that we are in a process of evolution all the time, and we continue our own inner quests. And speaking about myself, I noticed that if we take into account all these more than 30 past lives of myself that I have explored, I tend all the time to choose either an artistic professional path. I was a painter, I was a sculptor, I was a musician several times, not only when I was Tchaikovsky and so on. Or I'm choosing spiritual or religious, let's say, paths. I was a monk very frequently. I was a Christian Orthodox monk in Greece. I was a Catholic monk. I was one of the monks who founded the church with Saint Francis of Assisi in Italy in the medieval ages. I was a Buddhist monk in the Himalayas and so on. So my lives tend to be either on a spiritual or an artistic path. And in this current life, I'm blending the two. So it's quite interesting. So my soul always tends to be interested by emotional problems, by the relationship with the divine, by how to translate emotion into art, how to move people, how to transmit messages through art and so on. So these are some important themes of which my soul is very obviously attracted by. And in all these past lives and in my current life too, I noticed that I have this tendency of being a pioneer. Opening new roads and new perceptions. And generally, I think that when you are an artist, you have your own unique voice and you tend to express yourself, and this might be more or less suitable with the society in which you live. And so it's not something new that I'm doing in this lifetime, a work of, let's say, a pioneer. But I want to emphasize also that people are sometimes reluctant to the idea of past lives only in this part of the world. Because
Yes.
if I go in Asian countries, they really don't think it's something new. It's something that has thousands of years before. And there are a lot of studies and a lot of works which show important proofs, let's say, about the fact that this past lives really exist, because there were very gifted, let's say, children that told to their parents in a very natural way, listen, I do remember when I was a pilot on an airplane in the Second World War and so on, and the parents said, oh my God, what you are speaking about. And there are famous case studies which you might also find on the internet about children recollecting about their past lives in quite a natural way. It didn't happen to myself, but I know, and I studied also all these interesting case studies, and so I don't think it's such a new thing what I'm doing. It's only new for Europe and for the Americas, but for Asia, it's not something so revolutionary as it may be. But what I want to say is that one of the most important lessons that I learned from my first Reiki teacher and master was something that I'm also promoting through my book and through my podcast, the idea to live in truth, to be authentic with yourself. And if you really have an experience and you really believe in what you feel and you really want to send a message towards the world, do it. Because I think that to live in truth is what allows you not to have important regrets when you leave this world in this current life. It's important to be yourself. And I think that I tried as much as possible to be myself, to live in truth, and this is what pushed me to write this book. Of course, I'm not trying to convince anyone about past lives, about my past identities and so on. I'm not interested in it. I just wanted to communicate what was shared with me, because once again I felt it was to some extent a moral duty, or a sacred duty, if you want, if the word sacred is not too much, because when you receive so much gifts, and I thought that all the revelations that I had on the trance were gifts, were spiritual gifts for myself, you say, listen, but maybe these gifts might also help other people. And this was what pushed me forward. Of course, that it was not easy all the time. Of course, that people around me sometimes looked at me reluctantly. Mm-hmm. And I think it's normal. I'm a very grounded and analytical person. And I think this is, to some extent, my gift, because I've met some therapists or spiritual persons who are, let's say, their head in the clouds. And I'm not at all like this. Probably my background also in marketing makes me to be very grounded and very analytical. And I'm always trying not to beat about the bush. So I'm always trying to be extremely clear and logical in everything that I'm doing or I'm saying. And the first person who puts a question mark on my own experiences is myself. Because when I am under trance, I'm always analyzing everything that I feel or receive, and I'm analyzing twice all the time. Listen, is this exactly what I'm feeling or I'm seeing? So I'm a very, very analytical person, and I'm everything that I wrote in the book or that I'm promoting in Time Traveling Podcast is based on practical experience. And it's hard to do it, because coming back to your question, being a grounded person, I understood that, of course. Try to imagine yourself. You are tomorrow with your closest friends and having a cafe in Spain, and you are all of a sudden telling to them, listen, I was Antonio Gaudi in a past life, ha 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 ha, my God, yes, of course you are Antonio Gaudi, So you understand, of course, that I was aware that people will, of course, and especially my family and my friends, will look in a very strange way to myself, but I felt that I have to surpass it, and it was very difficult in some moments to surpass it, because my experience and my messages for the world were much more important than the reactions of the people nearby. And I think that it's something also in the Bible. I think that Jesus himself told that someone who brings new ideas, a prophet, is never welcomed in his family or in his country, something like this. I'm sorry that I don't remember right now the exact excerpt, the exact quote, but this happens, of course, that frequently, unfortunately, you might not be well regarded by your closest people. But this doesn't mean that you are not authentic or that you don't have to pursue your own inner voice and your own inner call.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's something that I speak a lot about in various different ways on the shows and everywhere else. That, um, especially as a highly creative human being, if you're not being authentic, it very easily turns to anxiety or depression. It very
Yes,
easily, if you're not like, if you're wearing a mask constantly, it really, or like trying to filter what you mean for somebody or trying to kind of manipulate what you're making so people would like it better, it very easily goes dark
yes,
because we really have to feel fulfilled and feel like what we're expressing is like really from our heart and really what true to us to be able to keep going doing this. I
yes,
think like you to have the fire within you to keep going. And I think that again comes also from realizing the impact that it could have. I mean, on one person or on many. I mean, you could change someone's day by having a really cool painting in their house, or you could really change people's perspective on something that, as you say, when you go to the East, I spent so long in India, and they talk about past lives or reincarnation all the time. But I think maybe it's from the religions that we have in
mm,
the West, where it's more like when you die, you go to heaven or hell. You don't stick
mhm,
around and
mhm.
get born again. That
Yes,
people
yes.
are, people are maybe a little bit more skeptical. But I think also it's really important what you said, that sometimes in the spiritual communities, for example, I have a close friend of my family's who's also a past life regression healer, and she does a lot of stuff that she's not so analytical, so she can come across as a quite head in the clouds until she's in her like zone. Then you can feel
Yeah.
that she's very serious about what she's doing. But I think I've spent loads of time in spiritual communities, of course, from like yoga, meditation, and I've also studied Reiki. I did massage for 8 years. That people can really get caught up in the curiosity of like what could be out there, that we like going really deep into all these other lives, but maybe not grounding the lessons into this current life. And I think that that's the difference. That's what makes it feel a little bit more grounded, because you're like, okay, go into this life and you never know who you could have been, but what are you learning here?
Mhm.
How are we continuing to evolve?
Ellie, I want to emphasize a very important idea. When you start a regression therapy, if you work with a serious and well-trained therapist, you don't ever start simply out of curiosity in order to see if you are Elizabeth I of England or William Shakespeare in a past life. So
Yeah.
you always start with a particular problem that you have in your current life, of course. And it might be an emotional blockage, a repeated pattern of behavior that you can't surpass, a phobia, a nightmare that repeats, um, an inexplicable physical pain that you haven't found answer to, even if you went to see a lot of doctors and you did a lot of analysis. And these are also only a few examples. So you start with a problem that you have that already bothers you in the current life. And this brings you back, like doing a rewind, let's say, to the movie of your life, either in your current life or in a past life, to the zero moment, to the cause, to the root of your problem. And each problem might have one or more roots. Because let's have an example. Maybe you have a problem in entering a love affair, and you always are very afraid of commitment and becoming really part of a strong relationship. And then you go to see a therapist, and you go firstly in your current life, and when you revisit very traumatic events from your childhood, when maybe your parents were screaming and your father was abusing your mother and so on, and you have a trauma, and that makes you to be afraid of long-term relationships. But then maybe you do 1 or 2 sessions, and the therapy then reconsiders your symptoms, because you always measure the symptoms when you start working with a client. And then the symptoms have lowered, but not so much as you wish. And then you go back under trance and you see a past life, when maybe you had a very miserable past life in which your husband or your wife, depending if you were a man or a woman, treated you very badly, and you promised yourself, I'll never get married again. And then you must understand the meaning behind all these experiences, and heal them and solve them and accept them, and follow all the necessary steps under the guidance of the therapist in order to heal. So what is important is that in the end, any therapy that you are doing, current life regression, past life regression, or any other therapy, it relates to your present current lifetime, because here is your problem. Here is what bothers you. So in the end, you must always come back to being grounded and being here and now, in order to really fulfill your healing. You go backwards in order to understand, and in order to unblock the emotions which are blocked there, because everything that is unsaid and unexpressed blocks you. But then you come back and apply it here and now. And that's a very important thing. So in the end, you are in the here and now, and it's very important for your healing to be grounded, and for your everyday life too.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of come towards the end of the conversation with 2 questions, and I'm going into them now because I think you may have already answered one. I want to see if there's something else that you could say,
Yes,
or maybe there's
please.
something else. The first question is, what is the most common misconception people have? Either it could be about you or about what you do you think?
Oh, I don't know what's the most important misconception about myself, but I think that it's easy to say about past life regressions. People are afraid that they might not wake up after a past life regression, and they might get stuck in the past life regression.
Really?
So of course, it's very funny, because I explain to people that trance or hypnosis is not at all something so miraculous as it may seem. Unfortunately, it was very much associated with magical practices and so on, but it's not. For people who are practicing meditation, it's very easy to go into trance, for example, because trance is only a very deep state of relaxation, and you naturally, and I emphasize, you naturally touch this state of altered consciousness on a daily basis each time when you are going to sleep, because between this, let's say, normal state of consciousness when you are awake and the deep sleep, that's a very short moment which might last for seconds or minutes, when you are not awake anymore, but you are not in the deep sleep either. You are in between, and you are very, very deeply relaxed. And if a door slaps or someone enters in the room, you say, oh my God, you wake up very abruptly, and because you feel everything in a very sharply and very intense way. That's trance, that's hypnosis, but it's only that we enter this deep state of relaxation, and we make the client stay there for about 2 or 3 hours, depending on the session. So it's something natural, and it's a very deep state of relaxation. It's something that you are experiencing on a daily basis, but you are not aware of it, and it's more shortly when you are going to sleep than we use it when we are doing therapy. So I think that this is the most important misconception, that you must get stuck into trance. It's not possible. It's possible if you imagine that you are not going to be awake tomorrow morning, only if you had a heart attack during the night. But otherwise, of course, it's not possible. And the other misconception is that, oh my God, what happens if I'm going to see something terrible, something which might hurt my soul? And I'm honest with you, of course, my darlings, you are going to see something unpleasant, because no one has ever went to see a therapist because he's much too happy in his or her life, and he wants an explanation to this. So anytime you are going to see a therapist, when you have a problem, if it's a problem, if it's a blockage, of course that there is, let's say, a negative feeling behind and an unpleasant situation. But what is important is that you are already living in your current lifetime with that blockage and with the unpleasant symptoms which bring you to the therapist. So I would suggest that it's better to get rid of them, to get
Yeah.
rid of the unpleasant blockages that you have and to heal yourself. And so I think that it's more important to heal than to be afraid that you are going to see something unpleasant. And what I want to stress is that you are accompanied by a therapist who is your guide and who is there in order to help you pass through all the difficult problems and to release all the tensions, all the emotional blockages, all the negative emotions that were kept there, because this is what makes you sick. Because anytime when there is something that we don't express, we don't say, we don't really fully live in our lives, and we leave these feelings or these words blocked within ourselves, this in time will create physical illnesses. And it's really very important to free yourself. And
Yeah.
this is also what brings you to a new life on earth, because each time when you live a life, it's very interesting. When you are going in a regression therapy, we always revisit the death moment very carefully, because the emotions and the thoughts with which a human being lives towards heavens or the upper realms, as you choose to name them, are exactly the problems left unsolved, are the things that the frustrations, the difficulties, the problems he or she can't accept. And exactly these points are what you have to heal and what will bring the human being in another incarnation. Because we are always coming to heal what remained unaccepted, ununderstood, and so on. And
Yeah,
and
definitely. I can
and and
see that.
and I developed during my years of practice the following important healing equation that I will briefly explain right now.
Mm.
For healing something, you must understand why it happened. So understanding why is the most important step to begin with. Then after this, you start to do the second step, which is acceptance. You must slowly accept what happened to you. And then, after accepting, you are able to do the third important step, which is forgiveness. You must forgive yourself or the others or the mankind or the divine, the person or the entity with whom you are in that particular conflict. And then, after forgiveness, healing starts really to happen. So it's understanding, acceptance, forgiveness, and healing. And I think these are the most important steps to acquire within a healing process.
Definitely. And I think like any healing process that you're using for sure. The
Yes.
second question, again, I think I'm interested to know what you'd say for this one, is that if you look back over your life, or for you, you can also go into past lives as well, and think of a really memorable conversation that you experienced. Who were you talking to, and what was said that you remember?
Ooh. um, I think I will shock you. It's a very interesting question. No one has ever asked me something so deeply as you did right now. Um, it's something which you might also discover in my book, in Being Piotr Ilich. I was under trance. I was working on this particular past life. And then I had, let's say, a discussion with the divine. And he or she, depending on the approach you want to have towards the divine, told me, listen, I have always loved you so much. And you didn't mean myself, but all of us. But the problem was that, one, you are not evolving here in heavens where the perfect comfort made us simply to enjoy the comfort, but not to evolve. And then you couldn't really appreciate my love, the freedom, the joy, everything that you have here in heavens. And so I had to send you towards the lower vibrations in order to evolve and in order to learn how to love. Because you can't really learn how to love and how to appreciate the other one when you don't have a contrast, when you don't have a degree of comparison, when you don't know what it means to be without the other one, when you don't know what to be alone or to be afraid or to be in darkness means. And I felt that now we are able to return towards the upper realms and to really appreciate freedom, love, absolute love of the divine presence when we know what the difficult life here means. When here we are apparently, at least apparently, sometimes alone, and when we sometimes feel disconnected, although we are not. And I felt that the divine simply awaits us to return back home and to love him or her and to finally receive his or her love, which we couldn't really receive and appreciate before. And I simply felt a bit of, I don't know how to say it in order to not to use too big pompous words. I felt the divine, not only the divine love, but the divine sadness of having to wait for us so much, and also especially having to see us suffering so much. And I felt this great joy of feeling this future moment of, let's say, reunification between us and the divine. Although what I want to stress is that I understood that in order to make our evolution as mild as possible, the divine created to some extent, let's say, a projection or a dream for us in order to be easier for us to come here on earth, to learn, to evolve, to have different experiences, because we never completely leave the upper realms. Our higher selves are always there. Only a small amount of our energy descends towards earth and is incarnated in a physical body, and then when we finish one particular lifetime, we go back and we pour into our higher self all our experience and our knowledge. And so it's not as harsh as it may seem at the first glance, but I thought that feeling the divine sorrow because of our suffering and our long evolution and waiting for ourselves to grow up, it was very more than touching, more than I can express in human words. And seeing this, perceiving this future possibility of coming back and loving the divine as our choice, not as something that was imposed to us because we were born there in his or her energy, seemed more than touching for myself. And I tried to convey as clear as possible this message exactly at the end of my book, Being Piotr Ilyich. So for the people who want to discover the message, they might read it there. And I want to close up this question with something funny. It was a very close friend of mine who read the manuscript of the book before it was published and told me, listen, I think that the end of the book is very interesting, but it's quite erotic, I think. And I was very shocked. Erotic. And I didn't understood at the first glance what she wanted to mean. And she said, yes, that thing, the discussion with the divinity, it's quite an erotic. And I smiled and I said, yes, I never thought about it like this. But it is erotic because it's not sexual, but it's full of very intense and pure love. And I think that what the divine one also wanted from us was to make our return home in his or her arms our own choice, born out of our own free will. And this is very important because it's like a parent who tells to his children, listen, go into the world, have your own experiences, live everything that you want, do everything that you dream of. And if you want and when you want, I'm here to wait for you, to embrace you, and to offer you all my love. But I'm waiting here. And I think that this was the thing, the discussion, if you want, that touched me most. It was under trance, and I what I want to tell in the end for the people who will maybe choose one day to read Being Piotr Ilyich is that this book is as authentic as possible in this moment when we speak about AI and so on.
Yeah.
Why? Because this book was not written in a classical way, but it is translated from 100 hours of audio recording of my trances. So we always audio record any past life regression sessions when we work with anyone. I recorded also, of course, my own sessions as a client, and I translated word by word. So I only tried as, let's say, an author to avoid repetitions or grammatical mistakes and to give a chronological order to the happenings described in Tchaikovsky's life, because when you are under trance, you are not always following chronological order. So in order to be easy to read, I chose to give a chronological order to the facts described in the book. But otherwise, the book is transcribed from my own trance words. So it is like broadcasting live, let's say, from Tchaikovsky's life, and then from my own healing process, during which I received these great answers from the world above. And I hope once again that these answers might also help all the people who might one day choose this book.
Yeah, definitely. Just to kind of leave everyone with the easiest next step, where is the best place to find the book? Is it available worldwide, or is it?
Yes, it's worldwide. The best solution is to enter my author website, chrisnielsenbooks.com. You also have free sample chapters there if you simply want to discover a bit of the book. And there you have all the purchase possibilities on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, Smashwords, and so on. Both, it's available, of course, both hard copy and ebook. And you also have there my social media channels, and of course my YouTube channel if you want to discover time traveling, my podcast, in which I'm developing on all the topics discussed in the book, adding more practical examples.
Amazing. Well, of course, I'll leave all of those links in the show notes for everyone to go and find. But thank you again so much for your time, for giving me a little bit extra time, for being on the show. It's been really interesting and really, yeah, I think that people will really find this conversation super intriguing. So you guys listening, do share this episode with a friend, or if you find us on social media, do tag us if you share it, or let us know the best your key takeaway from this conversation, which I think could be a whole world of things. So Chris, thank you again so much for being on the show.
It was such an honor.
And everyone listening, thank you again for listening. I'll see you again next week. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Maverick Mind. I hope that you've loved it, and if you have, I would appreciate it so much if you would subscribe and write a 5-star review on wherever you're listening to this podcast from. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, I invite you to join me over on Instagram at maverickmindco or on my website maverickmind.elliefoden.com. And I'll see you in another podcast very, very soon.